So we have in Yoga Campus these yoga conversations with teachers that are uh, working with Yoga Campus, and in this instance, a teacher who's been working with Yoga Campus for many years. I'm delighted to welcome T.S. Little, co-founder of Prajna Yoga School. T.S. has been engaging with yoga teachers, teacher training, and has created a body of work that we're excited to talk about with him today. So welcome, T.S.
Hello, Kristen. So good to see you.
It's great to see you too.
Mm.
So you are, in addition to a teacher and a trainer, you are an author, and I'm wondering if maybe you could tell us a little bit about one of the projects that you're working on currently.
Oh, sure. Well, my first and most substantial book was on the subtle body, and I've continued to really have great love and interest in what I like to term the subtle body, and so the new project I'm working on now is all on what I call sensory awareness training, and we are we are an organism that receives the world through our sensory gates. And so when we refine, our capacity to sense or sensate, whether it's hearing, very subtle sounds in the environment, or sensation that creeps through our skin and fascia, we really become more, refined beings. And so my interest is in this sensory work. And so the project I'm working on now is really just a in-depth journey through this practice of sensory awareness training.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the title, sensory awareness training. Where did that come from?
Well, really, it links to our sensory motor system, and so it's every perception, every contact, every thought affects our sensory motor feedback loop throughout our whole body, and so we narrowed it down to satya rather than smatya, as sensory motor. Smatya doesn't sound as appealing. And also satya, of course, the word many of you will recognize in Sanskrit means, being or essence or truth. And so how the question is, how can we come to embody a presence or a beingness that is receptive and open and permeable, and so the work revolves around the sensory motor system, and it's very common, of course, for the pathways, the neurological pathways within our sensory motor feedback system to get blocked or inhibited or thwarted or frozen. So a lot of what we do is a kind of revival, sort of a revival, a somatic revival experience, meaning we resuscitate the fluids and we enliven the nerves that have been, gone dormant, either from too much sitting or not getting enough sleep or some kind of chronic pain. So yeah, so the sensory system we work in is very much about a kind of enlivening, or at least leading towards self-regulation.
Self-regulation is one of those really important concepts right now. This is, I think, for yoga teachers, really salient. It's helpful to have a framework for thinking about self-regulation as well. So I know that your Satya program is really well established, and I know that you have some cornerstones. Is it 4 cornerstones of Satya?
Yeah, the four kind of pillars to our practice are intimacy, immediacy, spontaneity, and the obvious. And these four pillars are really, all the practices we do. And I think for, those of you who are doing Qigong or Tai Chi, or even, you're gardening or doing macrame, whatever you might be doing, these four are so pertinent because the first, being intimacy is, can we really have that close contact with what's arising for us, whether thoughts are coming up or memories or fears or dread or fatigue. We want to really touch into what's there. What is it? What's arising, and that, of course, is a real mantra in Zen training, which I have been steeped in over the years. Some Zen masters, when a monk says, what is Buddha nature? The response will be, what it is or what's arising. And so we really want to come into the immediacy, which is the second one, the immediacy of what's here. And so in service of, coming to presence. I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh said, the present moment is where life can be found. And if you don't arrive there, you miss your appointment with life. And so we're trying to get to the appointment in that we use our sensory system to really land on not only like, where's your breath now? Or where do you have pain in your body? Is it in your lumbar? Is it along your sciatic nerve? Or, what are you telling yourself? What messages are you taking into your inbox? So that intimacy, immediacy, those first two pillars. And then the third is really my favorite, which is spontaneity. And it's, having been in the yoga world for many years and a dedicated practitioner, as I know many of you listening are, and you have a kind of routine. You do your sun salutations and you do your triangle and your half moon pose. And then we come to the point where we want to invoke a kind of spontaneity. It's like, what might come in outside of my immediate, field of perception? How can I contact that which is unfamiliar? And this, brings us into a realm whereby we can discover the new. And so, outside of routine choices or routine patterns of movement or routine thinking, right? We just get caught, again and again into cycles of routinized, way of being. And so it's kind of like take the side street, like sit in the park, and look up into the great oak tree and what comes to you. And so we try to bring that onto the mat, like that spontaneity of, oh, here's a movement I've never done before. Here's a neural pathway that has never really been open for me before. And so certainly as a teacher, I'm always inviting students into those new neural connections, new ways of perceiving who we are and who we think we should be. And so this, of course, is a really important part of the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, the Yoga Dharma, is can we sort of loosen our perceptions of ourselves?
And is that the final pillar, the obvious?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Well, what we do encourage seeing clearly. There's a beautiful expression from the Zen master Hongzhi, an early Chan Zen master in China, who spoke about seeing straight through to the bottom, of a clear creek or a clear, mountain stream where the water is cold and you can see the stones straight down at the bottom of the current. And so we want to develop a kind of clarity of like, oh, what's arising now? Like, oh, there's pain in my body. And as a, in the wellness industry, as a coach or a guide, a therapist, I'll ask the student, well, where is the pain? And they're like, well, it's down there somewhere, And I'll say, well, is it on your right lower back or your left lower back? Is it in your sacrum? Is it at L5S1? Is it traveling down through your buttock? So we want to become more and more clear as to what's there. And then that recognition, that acknowledgement, that gives us an opportunity to work with. So it might be like, a mental formation. It's like, oh, dread. It's like every time I come to sit, I sort of default to my dread mode, my fear, my uncertainty. And so it'll be really valuable to see that, to like draw a kind of, window around it. And then, then the healing work begins. Then we can really, make progress. So yeah, so the obvious is like getting more and more clear um, about what's there.
And that really, it sounds, from what you've just described, that this work can be useful therapeutically. So, not just for us as individuals being our own therapists, but for yoga therapists who are working with clients and using this work.
Well, that's right. I always feel like it begins in our own yoga lab. So
Yeah.
when you have a corner of your house in your living room or your studio, wherever you practice. So then you go into your lab and you just now have to tinker a bit like, what we ask, what are my fatigue levels like today? How much exhaustion do you have in your body? How's your digestion? How are your peristaltic rhythms? Are they really squirrely? Are they, are you slightly bloated? Is there, spastic peristaltic flow, or is it very stagnant and stuck? So, this inquiry is so important in our work. And so we get into our yoga lab and we start inquiring in our yoga body. Of course, we ask what's there. And this is really important. So therapeutically, it helps us to work with, when we have sleeplessness or we have chronic pain, or we suffer from some kind of low grade immune syndrome. We can start to target areas and work with them. But first, we need to have that perceptual skill to notice what's there. And that's a lot of the work we do because we move very slowly in the Satya. We're not of the, high octane power flow, school. We're really of the slow school of just going at your own pace. We like to say moving at the pace of your own curiosity, like what's arising. And that by way of slowing down, we can see more. It makes our eyes clear and we can see more what's there. And so, yeah, that's when the therapeutic journey really begins.
And the slowing down and the seeing what is there, I think that really links to the next question I have for you, which is about the benefits of satya and who can best benefit from doing this work.
Well, that's right. I mean, I know in my own body that speed or rush, gets trapped in my tissue. It goes into my gut. It causes, my diaphragm to become, constricted. It affects my mandible or my carotid sheath in my neck. And so it affects blood pressure. And so really, when speed gets trapped in the tissue, it really inhibits and causes anxiety and stress and racy dreams or sleepless nights, and and affects our cellular rhythms. So really, this work is not only about slowing down, but beginning to bring in the nutritive quality of what we loosely call prana, which is really bringing fluids into the cells to irrigate the tissues in blood. I mean, it's a kind of resuscitation practice, and that's a word we use a lot because when we become constricted or we get caught in speed traps, our cells don't percolate, they don't breathe. So we get to the floor. That's
Mm.
first. We go down to the ground level. We don't start standing. We get the nervous system out of gravity. We get the spine out of gravity. We get the brain out of gravity. So we're on the floor for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes as we evolve in this work. And it really starts to affect the sensory motor feedback loop. it starts to really affect the metabolic activity, within the gut and the lymphatic tissue and the brain. So yeah, so we really encourage people not to get off the floor. That's really important, actually, because we want the whole vasovagal system, that system which affects extensively our autonomic nervous system, meaning your heart rate, your blood pressure, your appetite, your sex drive, your sleep. We want to get into the autonomics, which are under the radar of the cognition. They're outside of the thinking mind. So when we get into the body and we're on the floor, it is quite watery, this practice. And it's really healing for the joint spaces, for the nerves and the digestion, because we're not holding ourselves up. And so really that's where the practice begins, is in Shavasana, essentially. And it's a long sort of, medley of movements, rocking, teasing, flowing in and out of different movements, and then being still and letting what we call the inner physician, which is the body's own intelligence or self-regulation or capacity to self-regulate. So then that inner physician kicks in the stillness and the silence.
Well, you had me at it all starts with Shavasana. I think there's so many people that could resonate with that sense of speed being trapped in the body and feeling the effects of that on a daily basis. So
yeah, that's right. I mean, usually we consider, we do Shavasana at the end. So you do all this rigmarole, you kind of, huff and puff. And then at the very end, maybe for 20 seconds, you lie on your back. And we begin in that, what I think sometimes is called in, circles of wellness and body mind integration, simply like active rest. And so when you're on your back, well, if you're really tired, people fall right asleep, of course. So we have to address fatigue and exhaustion first. But when we're on our back, we begin to, allow the nervous system to start to self-regulate. And your body has its own intelligence. It's a beautiful thing. And it has been, operative for, thousands of years, going back to, single-celled organisms, or the fish, or the creepy crawlies, or the ones that fly in the air. And so yogis have always looked to the animal forms to learn how to rehabilitate and to return to the body mind's capacity for self-regulation. Anyhow, so when we're out of gravity, we let that intelligence do its good work.
When I contemplate this sort of training, and I can see that you've got Satyas 1, 2, and 3, a question arises in my mind, and this may be true of people who are listening, of how do you move through this training? What's the difference between Satya 1, Satya 2, and Satya 3?
Well, in the first, part of the training, was really about embodiment. It's really about getting your own nervous system to regulate by slowing down and moving slowly and small. So we do a lot of small movements, which can be tricky for the brain that's used to arms up and fold down and then jump back, and big movements for the musculoskeletal system. Sometimes we just move, you pull the shoulder forward, you drop the shoulder back, you pull it forward, you drop it back. And by those slow, small, repeated movements, we start to repattern the nervous system and rewire, essentially, the energy of the brain. So the first one is all about, getting into the movement patterns. And the second, at the second level, we really work with the prana, how this practice is essentially a kind of pranayama, because we're moving with the breath it's like vinyasa on the back, moving with the breath. And then the third one, we really focus on the effects of trauma and the effects of, the freeze response or the collapse response or the ways in which the nervous system gets really dysregulated. And but then we also do this practice in the chair. People can't get to the floor. It's like, oh, you can slide and glide. You can mobilize your joint tissue and start to train your nervous system by some standing work, but mainly chair work and then of course lying down. So yeah, in the third section, we start to address the effects of the fight or flight response and how to self-regulate in this work.
It all sounds like just what we need. I think this training feels like a useful refresh for the individual, but also the individual that supports other individuals. So, T.S., thank you so much for not just sharing this with us, but also for doing the work, for being such a pioneer in this work. And I know that the people listening will also find this so valuable. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kristen. What a joy to be with you, and I look forward to seeing all of you in our what we like to call the slide and glide practice in days ahead.
Thanks, Diaz.